Scott, it is Friday afternoon, and if there's one person in the world that I am so happy to be interviewing, it is you.
Well, Becca, I am totally flattered, and that's fantastic to be back in your world. I love it, and I tend to agree. Well, it's Friday afternoon where you are. It's Friday morning where I am, but I've had 2 cups of coffee and 3 shots of espresso, so we're good to rock and roll.
Yeah, well, I've had quite a bit today as well, so we'll both be bouncing through this interview. Going, going. Anyway, I want to pick your brains on the world at the moment. I mean, I can't even watch the news actually at the moment. So I was listening to the radio this morning, just one thing after another. So, but from your point of view as a restructuring expert, how is the world economy looking in light of everything that's going on?
I think it starts with the unsettledness of the geopolitical landscape, and of course, the continuing war in Ukraine, the upset in the Middle East. Those are the pretty obvious ones. While the fundamentals of the economy still remain pretty strong around the world, now you have the uncertainty surrounding U.S. policy following the
Yeah.
election of Donald Trump, tariffs, immigration, uh, how we're going to move away from focus on non-carbon emission type industries back to focus on fossil fuels. So it's a lot of uncertainty in those policies. What U.S. is going to do on interest rates. I saw yesterday Europe dropped interest rates with the expectation that the U.S. is going to drop interest rates next week, which is very likely, notwithstanding a bump in inflation. So I think that while there was more predictability pre-U.S. election and fundamentals still remain strong, there are issues that are creating a little uncertainty and something we're not going to really know a ton about until the administration goes into full gear. That said, it was interesting to see that the UK economy has come roaring back, while economies like Germany continue to falter, particularly in light of what's been happening in the automotive industry and how China has kind of taken over Germany's top spot.
Yeah, it's all quite exhausting, isn't it? Quite a deep track of
What,
that.
you
But
didn't follow all that? You didn't follow all that, Becca? Come on. I thought
it's
it
when
was a
you put
pretty.
it like that, it's like, oh, it's mind blowing. I'm thinking
You
of
know,
getting a
this is what
small
happens.
holding. Do you want to
This
come on
is
it with me?
you wanted a Friday afternoon interview. You got it.
Yeah, the relaxing Friday discussion. Yeah. So when we had the pandemic, and I talked to you back then, there were certain industries that worldwide were facing particular stress. How are those industries faring now? And are there others that you think now are, having a harder time? Like you've mentioned automotive already, but
Yes,
what
and
else?
yeah. So also a really good question. Here in the U.S., I would say the industry that's going to be top of mind, particularly with the incoming industry administration, is farming, because there's a lot of migrant workers in the farming sector here in the U.S. And of course, there's already inflationary issues in food here in the U.S. But you take migrant workers out of the mix, if food prices go high, that's going to hit inflation real hard. So that one is directly related to the bringing back of Donald Trump. But there are others in the crosshairs. Retail still remains wonky and continues to struggle. Healthcare continues to be very unsettled. Automotive for sure, and commercial real estate. So there's still a lot to be worked through, and those industries have been a continuum of struggle over the course of years for factors largely unrelated to the election. However, the election may exacerbate some of those issues. Commercial real estate, and healthcare seem to be in consistent state of flux, but always in these last several years in the crosshair were restructuring and distressed opportunities.
So do you think they're going to continue to be issues in the coming year in 2025? And do you think there are going to be other sectors emerging as problem areas?
Well, you still have the issues of AI and automation that are starting to impact industry, but the full fallout of what that means hasn't yet come into full light. AI is moving, at warp speed, as we know, and I think industries are starting to respond to that, but it's moving faster than we're able to respond to it. And those companies that are gravitating to the change related to AI and automation will succeed sooner than those that don't not have the resources to retool to be responsive to this, or will simply falter or fail or consolidate. So, and by the way, that's not necessarily a bad thing. As I said in the beginning of this conversation, I think right now economic fundamentals worldwide are pretty strong. Granted, you have emerging economies like India. That's a whole other issue. You have a lot of problems in China. Again, another issue. But if you look at Western society, Europe and the US particularly, with exception, you have pretty good fundamentals, you have lower interest rates, you have stabilized inflation. That said, we're still in a period of extreme change, particularly with AI and automation. In the US, what's interesting is because we're going through this industrial revolution type changes, we're also here in the US seeing a lot of unionization and the effect,
Right.
maybe not in 2025, but beyond 2025, it's something that's been a trend for the last couple of years. It continues to be a trend. Just today, there was a major union victory of the Teamsters Union, Amazon in California. That still doesn't mean that there'll be fruitful negotiations and a collective bargaining agreement that works for the workers, but you continue to see that unionization is becoming more prominent as we move away from traditional labor force focus and more onto AI and automation. You saw before the election that longshoremen launched a huge strike here in the United States because of automation and the fact that so many jobs were going to get lost. So we are a world in flux. Electric cars, of course, in Germany, and how China took over that market, decimated one of the biggest industries in Germany. So, again, there are pockets of trouble, but for different reasons. And I can pretty safely say not a continuum that points to any kind of a severe recessionary downturn, at least not at this point.
Do you think that might come though? I mean, if you think about AI, people being frightened about AI, which is essentially what you're talking about, they're going to rein in their spending before the AI kind of comes in and settles down and people realize there's different ways of working. Do you think we'll have a blip where we hit
Yes, absolutely. In any industrial revolution, which this is an industrial revolution, adaptability and adoption are critical. However, people don't care for change, and they believe that the thing that they're most used to is the thing that should never change. And when it does change, it creates a wave of panic because it's unfamiliar. I think AI is becoming, of course, more adapted to. However, we also know that AI and automation particularly are a pretty radical change in how we as a world and our industries are going to operate. I believe that most people, and myself included, find that this will be a good thing for our world economy, and it will create efficiencies, and it will create a change in thinking of how we function. And of course, like everything else in human history, will create the emergence of new ideas that will make us better, stronger, more economically sound and functional. But adoption takes time, and there's got to be upset, contraction, and rethinking before there's expansion. So yeah, there'll absolutely be blips along the way, but in the long term, these are good things. This is the advancement of society.
Yeah, so are you using AI every day?
Not every day. I happen to like the way I speak and write.
We're using it a lot now. We're finding all sorts of things that it can do, and things you don't even think about.
Well, however, AI is, it's kind of like dating. It's complicated, right?
I'll tell you, I use one called Claude, and the team genuinely thought I got some French bloke I was asking for advice, and they wanted me to bring him to the team meeting.
Well,
go, oh, he's got a nice accent.
Well, yes, I've seen AI offerings for everything: companionship, how to write brief and law. Well, but kidding aside, one of our Turnaround Management Association conferences, our Next Gen conference, did a lawyers panel on the ethics of utilization of AI. Well, it's an emerging area of law, because if there is malpractice as a result of dependence on AI, who's responsible? Is it the law firm? Is it the lawyer? Is it the AI provider? You know,
Oh,
we're
all those are tough questions.
well, we're in a world of unknown, because AI is moving faster than we're defining its uses. And as you can see, people are falling into its ease of use for information, for grammar, for writing, for informational resourcing. For We're starting to lean on it faster than we know that it has the capability to compensate for human thinking. And we
Yeah,
have to be
it
really
doesn't.
careful in that, because
Yeah.
yes, when you go back to the fundamental question, will that cause upset and distress? It has to,
Yeah.
because we as people, when we see the ease of its use and the benefits it could provide, will at some point and in some sectors depend on it too quickly. And when it falters and fails, we will then have to do a reset. And of course it'll falter and fail. It's again, it's one of the industrial revolutions of history. So before, like anything else that we've seen in technology over the last 30 or 40 years, it is moving at light speed, but at some point it'll have to slow down as we learn it and see where it is not as golden and as sometimes perfect as people would like it or believe it to be.
No, I totally agree. I've found that it's only as good as the questions I ask it and my editing, because you have to know the topic to be able to
Of
work.
course,
It's not
right?
done right. So I totally agree with you. And talking about unknowns, because obviously we don't know where AI is going to end up, but the other unknown in your life at the moment is the US election and what's
Yep.
with that. So talk to me about the the sort of what you think will come out over the next year and what impact that's going to have.
Of course, you asked that question, Becca. As
No, and actually, if you've got
everybody
any other views on what you think might
everybody
happen.
wants to know. Okay, yeah, it's a fair question. Um, let's start with the fact that the United States made a profound statement in the bringing back of Donald Trump, in that it did not like the political status quo. So while Donald Trump was very much an outsider in 2016, he was much more of a known quantity in 2024. So I believe while there's a lot of unpredictability about implementation of policy, there's a lot more predictability around the person slash politician that he is now versus the maverick outsider that he was then. And I think that also creates a higher level of accountability. And I believe, particularly as you've seen with the recent meetings of the leaders of Europe, and Canada and Mexico, that world leaders are trying to preempt the uncertainty that they know will come, because they now know, at least to some degree, what to expect, notwithstanding that his modus operandi is to thrive in a world of chaos and unpredictability. But I do believe that there's more predictability and accountability around who he is and what he's bringing to the table now. Now, of course, questions on the bigger issues of immigration and tariffs certainly are front and center, and how relations are going to be affected. Particularly, I'll just choose tariffs as one issue.
Yeah.
Is it likely that this administration will blanket the world with tariffs immediately and fully, the way that it sounded when first announced? I don't think so. You look at the relationship and the trading partnership with the UK, with Canada, with Mexico. They're too important to create major economic upset without some modification. And there's going to be different levels of tariffs. Blanket tariffs, I think, are a failure, and any economist will tell you that. Targeted tariffs may have the intended effect. Industry target tariffs, it's a whole other story. So you use the word tariffs. I don't think the world is going to get blanketed. Will we have some kind of a trade war scenario with China again? Probably. but historically, that's also no one's surprise,
No.
right? I mean,
Yeah, no,
that's
absolutely. But you've
yeah,
got a huge amount of, I mean, if you look at who's brought around, you've got a huge amount of business experience there, if
correct.
nothing else. And you've got Elon Musk sitting next to him. He's not going to want difficulties in his exports and things, is he? So,
You know, you have people that've been brought into the administration, putting aside the people who I think have been put out there for the dramatic flair of putting them out there. But to your point, move away the clutter, and you do see a lot of people who have been incredibly successful in industry and business, and who understand economies and money and economics. And you look at those people, and while they may not necessarily get along with each other, there's a commonality of their interest in how to move things ahead. Now that may be politically counterintuitive to what the prior administration uh, used as its lens in terms of economic progress, industrial progress, social progress, regulatory progress, and these things I think will change, and some of them more dramatically than others. But I am cautiously optimistic that we're headed into a period of uncertainty, but not a period of complete negativity that will spin the world into a total chaotic state. I think there's enough people around in the administration who still understand that we want to succeed as a country and a world. And there's a lot more noise than maybe there will be in the actual implementation of policy that's as draconian as it may sound. And again, I go back to tariffs. No, I don't think the world is going to be blanketed with uniform tariffs. It just doesn't make sense to do that. However, there will be pointed, punitive decisions that are going to be made in terms of how to target and where it will both have political gain and potential economic gain, you know, in almost an isolationist way for the U.S.
interesting. When, I mean, since the pandemic, I mean, things have changed generally. There's been so much turmoil and change, and I'm interested with this whole business approach. This is what's really grabbed me in the US, that I don't think we've ever seen a government that's had so much business experience in it before. So, you know, like you've been saying, it'd be interesting to see how it pans out. But they've also been working with younger generations, because obviously they're employers. They are bringing these younger people in, and the way they're working is so different as well, and their whole approach to the world is very different. And I'm seeing it with my own youngsters. How much do you think industry really needs to embrace those changes as well that the younger generation are bringing with them in order to survive? Because you're getting really a two-tier approach to work at the moment, and I think that divide's becoming clearer and clearer as we go.
Yes, also a great question. I'm sorry I didn't think of it myself. Um, um, Here's what I say to that. Let's clear the decks on this being political, because it's not. This is generational.
Yeah.
You have 4 generations in the workplace for probably what will be the only time for hundreds of years. You have people who are still post World War II baby boomers to Gen Zers, and the divide is difficult to navigate because the ethics and the mentality of 4 generations and the evolution to where the next generation, the Gen Zers, are going to take us, is much more technology based, and is trying to define a landscape that I think a lot was thrust on us during the pandemic, that's causing faster change and desired adoption than we're actually tooled and prepared to do. So Gen Zers aren't driving the bus right now, but their desires, they believe, to be clearer than the generations before them. Notwithstanding, there's a lot to learn from having 4 generations of people in the workforce. And I think it would behoove us not to take pieces of learnings from each of those generations to make the best next generation of labor force, industry, and thought leadership as we can. And while that's a struggle, that's also a huge opportunity for us as a society, and what we can do to create a better path forward.
The interesting thing as well with sort of improving societies and young people coming up is that societies that have historically not been particularly advanced can sort of jump with IT and AI generations ahead. Whereas perhaps the US and the UK, we're quite set in our ways because we've done quite well for a long time. So we can't do those jumps. And we've seen it in the Far East quite a lot over the last 30, 40 years. Do you think there are areas of the world over the next sort of 50 years that are really going to come to the fore, and we're going to see real change in terms of where the power bases are sitting? Or do you think it's going to stay very much as it still is now?
I'll take it down to 10 years. Within 10 years, India will be the leading economy in the world. China's economy is struggling, if not faltering right now. And I think India will be a much more dominant and forceful voice, which, if it is, will also take the APAC region to another level. And they don't yet see themselves necessarily as a leader of the Southeast Asia and that part of the Pacific region. However, think about it, they are going to be the leading economy there. And while a lot of focus is on what they do and what they are doing in building what will be the leading economy by 2024, the residual impact on their partnerships is going to happen first in that part of the world, which is, many countries there are doing fine, but not with the same kind of economic prowess that the US, China, and Western Europe have enjoyed for a long time. So yes, there will definitely be a pretty seismic shift once what the India economy looks like, and when it starts to lead and has a leading voice, that will most definitely change the economic landscape and who's part of that conversation and how we move forward based on that.
That's great. So what would your advice be, just to finish off, what would your advice be for your TRI person who's sitting there listening to all this and thinking, what's this mean for me in terms of how I approach my business going forward? What are your top tips for them?
Good question. I would say that in the next, let's call it, in the next 5 years, you're going to see a pretty seismic shift as well as settling of what the world economy going forward looks like. Because all the fundamentals are in front of us right now. AI, automation, a shift of economic power away from traditional economic powers, the rise of the India economy and what that's going to mean for that part of the world. I think you have to look at the pieces and evaluate where each country fits into the pieces of that puzzle as things change. Now, again, the thing right now is there are variables. Electric cars have, huge prowess, but now the United States is going to refocus on fossil fuel and oil drilling and things of that nature. So there are still uncertainties. The political turmoil, here in the United States. What happens to countries like Germany because of the downturn in its economy? So I think we still have a lot of variables out there, but the fundamentals of the shift in economic power, AI, and automation are definitely front and center. And also how we settle on what our work-life balance is based on generationally, what the next generation of people coming into the post-Gen Z people coming into the workforce in our economies, how they're going to shape it. And of course, technology remains a force du jour. And, this administration in the United States is going to very much put a huge amount of focus on Silicon Valley technology. So that's going to also play a profound effect. It may even advance our economies even further if there's a lot of attention and focus paid on what's developing in those sectors. So although that's a lot to chew on, I think the takeaway, if you were to pare it down, is we are progressing at light speed, but we can't necessarily assess what that means at the end of the day without a understanding that we're going to have to digest the pieces that are moving at very, very quick pace.
It was a good broad cover of all the things that are in the news and economy, and a very interesting session.
Get your popcorn, put your feet up, and Watch the world move, but be part of it.
I think that's all you can do at the moment because you can't
Yes.
influence anything. Just
Yes.
watch it play out. So, but it's been great to see you, Scott. If anybody wants to get hold of you, where should they get hold of you? LinkedIn, the website, what's best?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Scott Stewart. You can find me at Stewart at turnaround.org. I'm pretty easy to find, and I'm very accessible, and I'm always happy to talk to people, learn from people, interact, and be better for our world by listening and learning and interacting with folks like you.
Oh, well, it's lovely to see you. Are you doing anything exciting tonight?
Well, being that it's well below zero here.
Oh, it's Chicago, isn't it?
It's Chicago. I'm thinking a nice glass of wine and a Netflix movie sound kind of perfect.
Yeah, it does sound good actually. I think I'm going to flake out on the sofa too. Well, you have a lovely, lovely evening, and
Thank
I'll
you.
talk to you again soon. All right,
Thanks,
you take
Becca.
care.
Thanks.